Travis is a bad person and he doesn't listen to the rules, which he doesn't, and he's always late, then we don't have to give him a roster spot.
What's going on, everyone? This is the Aggie Game Day Extra podcast. I'm Travis Brown, senior Texas A&M sports writer here at KBTX. I don't have Tyler Shaw. I don't have Max Crawford with me. Tyler's in the other room, like working or something. Who knows? Max is out at a weatherman convention. So I thought I'd bring in someone even more knowledgeable than either of those two guys or me on some of the situations of college sports right now. And so I'm going to welcome Ben Portnoy of the Sports Business Journal. Ben is very knowledgeable in all the stuff going on in the business of college sports. And right now, that's what is going on in college sports, is the business of college sports. Ben, welcome. Thanks so much for giving us some time. Congrats on recently getting married. First we got to hear a little bit about the honeymoon. Where'd you go? What'd you do?
That was a heck of an intro. No, I appreciate it, Travis. It was awesome. I was made it out to the Dominican Republic for about a week. Had to put my phone away and ignore anything happening house settlement wise. It was awesome. So now back in the swing of things, and naturally got greeted with a bunch of lawsuits when I got back. So things are as normal as if they've ever been.
I mean, you always got to love coming back from having your toes in the sand to a bunch of lawsuits. That's everybody's dream. Well, let's get in a little bit to those lawsuits. I mean, first, just the House settlement. It was approved by Judge Claudia Wilkin about a month ago. Just generally speaking, what has been your perspective on this settlement, covering this settlement for as long as you have, and maybe kind of some of the pros and cons that you see from it? What is your 35,000 foot view of the settlement and how you've been able to cover it?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, look, like I think that most people that you talk to in college athletics, right, like across the enterprise, like will tell you that this is not a silver bullet, right? Like this is going to be something that essentially lays out the foundation and the groundwork for what comes in 5 years, 7 years, 10 years, whatever it is. This is kind of a starting point. And I think that when this was first conceived, I think the hope was that it would be a little bit more of a silver bullet, but I think that over time and as it's been litigated and everything else, it's become something that at least lays out some structure. And I think ultimately that's what college is, right? Is that it's structure. It's something that it has operated sort of freewheeling for the last 4 years, give or take, really. Uh, and without any rules, and I think that on paper, this at least gives you some rules to work.
Been able to talk with other athletic directors, other people, stakeholders in all of this. What's kind of the consensus about, generally speaking, we'll get into kind of some of the nitty gritty, but generally speaking, what this is, and kind of like you were saying, how much of a silver bullet is or isn't this from those stakeholders?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think again, like this gives you somewhere to start, right? So, yeah, it's not a perfect solution as far as, well, is this what college sports is going to look like when it's iterated 4 more times? Probably. But at the same time, I think it gives a lot of administrators some hope that, frankly, people will follow the rules. You've got rules that are held up in a federal lawsuit, so it's a little bit more, it's got a little more teeth to it, I think. I've kind of before of it's the NCAA in theory kind of just creating rules out of the blue, right? Obviously it's more complicated than that, but in theory they didn't have any legal standing creating the rules they were creating. Now with this rules you'll see around and all around fair market vetting of deals, things like that. Those are spelled out now in a federal lawsuit, and that has a lot more legal standing than just what the NCAA was doing. I think I kind of use this example all the time. It's a lot easier to tell the NCAA to buzz off than it is to tell the federal government to buzz off. And so I think like, that's ultimately, where this lands is that it does give a little more teeth. It gives a little more cover, I think, for the schools. And I think it gives some structure to be able to kind of build this thing out.
Yeah, so let's kind of get a little bit more of the nitty gritty of it. And I think the biggest piece that everybody is talking about now is the College Sports Commission. It's the entity that was created by the settlement and by some of the stakeholders to be the enforcement organization for this house settlement. Part of that is the NIL Go platform that athletes can submit their NIL deals to be approved. Some of it is keeping track of the tab of the cap and how much revenue sharing a lot of these schools are using. But it doesn't. It claims these people who created it, some of the ADs claim that it has teeth. How much teeth does it actually have, and how much are the people the stakeholders you're talking to? I guess, for better lack of better terms, fear it.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. And I think that, I was joking with Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports last week, saying that, when we get to the end of all of this, when the lawsuits stop, I think we're going to start studying for the bar together. Because at this point, I feel like I'm having to major in in antitrust law over the last year or two to kind of understand a lot of this. So, look, I mean, I would say this much: like, I'm not a lawyer and I can't necessarily predict it, but I do think that, again, this has more legal standing than anything that existed before. I think that ultimately that's what college sports needed or wanted. And there's still work to be done, right? Like, still probably need the federal government to step in and supersede uh, patchwork of state laws that we see across college athletics right now that operate a little bit differently state to state. But I do think that this gives you a structure to work with and a framework to work with. And I think a lot of people are really optimistic about that.
Yeah, so we'll switch off gears here and play a little bit of sports journalist banter. You, of course, used to cover the South Carolina Gamecocks amongst several other stops, so you know this region and you know the sports ball real well. We talked to Trev Alberts on Monday, kind of about A&M's views on some of this house settlement stuff, and he was on the implementation committee for NIL Go and the College Sports Commission, and he said that probably what it's going to take is one or two big name brands to get hit with the sanction, and ultimately for them to take their medicine, to say, okay, you're right, we agreed to this, we'll take the penalty. Do you see that? When has that ever happened in college sports? Like, do you see that happen? Is this going to be the actual platform that everybody actually says, okay, fine, you know what? We'll go with the rules. We'll take our punishment. We'll take our medicine.
It's funny you say that. I was down at the NACDA convention, which is essentially like the AD convention, about a week and a half ago, and I was chatting with an athletic director, an FBS athletic director, and they brought up the point. They were like, "Yeah, man, like, what do you have to write about now that college sports is fixed?" Kind of jokingly, and I told him, I was like, "Listen, I'm just waiting for you guys to all figure out the system, and then we'll have plenty of things to write about." So I do think you're right. Is that there is something to that of like college athletics have always kind of operated in this gray where, like, yeah, there are rules, but people tend to go around them all the time. And there hasn't been any way to sort of punish people or slap them on the hand for that. And I think that as you look toward this, right, there's going to be serious consequences and real consequences to it. And I think like that's going to be a difference, at least in theory. Now, again, you're right, is like if someone gets their hand caught in the cookie jar, are they just going to, tell the College Sports Commission that they don't want to operate under those rules? Like, yeah, probably. I'm sure there's going to be lawsuits coming down the pike of this, but I do think because this is laid out in a federal lawsuit again, like I think it gives it more teeth and gives it at least some legal standing in a way that nothing has before. And I think that matters a lot.
Yeah, I'll be curious to see. I mean, they've said there's the idea, and I don't know how much of your reporting you've been able to get into this, but the kind of contracts that they're passing around that says like, if you're going to be in these conferences, you're going to have to abide by the letter of the law from the College Sports Commission, and how legally binding that is. It's just going to be a really curious situation to see if like I said, this is going to be the missing piece that gets people to kind of play nicely and play along and not continue to try to, I don't even know if you call it a competitive advantage. It's just try to skirt the rules as best they can and toe the line of where the absolute edge of the rule is. To that point, what is some other parts of this settlement that have kind of piqued your interest the most, maybe beyond just the College Sports Commission, or even pieces of that we haven't touched on yet?
No, it's a good question. I think, one of the things that I'm really interested about is, I mean, baseball in particular is one that I think becomes a really interesting conversation. I think there's a lot of schools, especially in the SEC and the Southeast, that are going to prioritize baseball in a way that is matters. And I think that, how people are going to get with rev share and NIL and all of those things. And I spoke with South Carolina AD Jeremy Donati about this exact thing, and he made a point of baseball's kind of the one sport where you've had that has always had this limitation in scholarships. So you're going to see a big jump in scholarships. So I don't know if South Carolina, for example, is going to fund almost 35 scholarships or 34 scholarships, whatever the number, actually, the exact number is, or around there. Clemson, same thing. A lot of schools, same thing. So you're going to see a big cost jump in cost in scholarships because think about it, right? Like most schools, when you and I may be different in this capacity, but like for South Carolina, for example, every year it cuts a trip to the university for $9-10 million for its athletic scholarship. So adding 25 scholarships or 20 scholarships is a big investment. So on top of that, you're then having to figure out how to pay kids with care and how to pay them with NIL. So it becomes a huge expense really quickly in a sport that doesn't generate revenue for you most places. But I think a lot of schools are starting to think differently. So Florida State, for example, is getting ready to do some renovations on their baseball stadium that's going to include some more suites and some revenue generating spaces that's going to help that bottom line a little bit. But rather than I think right now they're $300,000, $500,000 to take on baseball. So it's not breaking even. They're making a little bit of money, but I think there's a lot that they could do better, right? And I think that same thing exists a lot of places. And so a sport like baseball becomes a really fascinating dynamic. How are schools going to attack it? Because there's the scholarship piece, there's the revenue share piece to it, and then there's the NIL piece on top of it. Oh, and by the way, you've got kids who are figuring draft decisions, so you have like numbers to play with there. So I think a sport like baseball becomes a really fascinating dynamic in the post-house world.
Over 40 years ago, my parents started C&J Barbecue, and today we continue to honor Dad's legacy with the best barbecue in the Brazos Valley. With locations on Harvey Road, Southwest Parkway, and our newest location on William Joe Bryan, we carry on our family tradition of serving up award-winning barbecue, sides, and desserts. We also offer delivery, catering, as well as custom menus and private chef services. Come visit us today for some of the best barbecue around. C&J Barbecue. The C is for Chip, the J is for Joe, and the barbecue is for you.
Yeah, and kind of to some of those points, a whole nother aspect on top of that for baseball and a lot of sports is this concept of the designated athlete, the athlete that would have been cut per the roster limits if it wasn't for the fact that they were kind of came to this consensus that they grandfather players in. But so Claudia Wilken in her brief that she put out for approving the settlement, she said that she thought that maybe this would make those athletes more valuable because they don't count towards the roster limit. You can have more bodies out there until they matriculate out, and the roster limits will come into play years in the future. But it doesn't necessarily seem like those athletes are holding as much value as Wilken believed. I mean, at A&M, they already had the case where a baseball player who's a local kid said he's in the transfer portal because he, in essence, got cut. And Trev Alberts, when we talked about how these designated athletes worked, he talked through the idea that those need to also comply with Title IX. And so shaping how those look at Title IX. How have you seen, when you've talked and seen so far with these, the designated athlete come into play at universities, and just how much value does that position now hold?
No, it's a good question of like, I guess how are schools differentiating value in certain athletes and things like that, and then like what is the cost of each athlete and things like that? Because I think this ties a little bit to what I was saying with baseball, and I think that for years the argument from the NCAA about why students shouldn't be paid was that you got a scholarship. Now, if you're a student athlete at Vanderbilt, that's like a $75,000 proposition every single year. So no, you're not getting cut a check $75,000, but your academics are being paid for, and that's a significant investment. And so I think you're going to see is that like, and a lot of people would sort of roll their eyes at that and say, oh, well, that's just the NCAA saying that they don't need to pay people. And look, I think there's a real argument to be made for that in football and basketball, and maybe a handful of other athletes here or there. But I think when you look at what these sports are providing, a lot of which is costing money, it's not driving, that you're going to place where certain athletes, like a scholarship is worth the price of admission kind of thing. Like you may not see rev share, but you may see your entire scholarship covered. So for example, baseball, right, is a good one, right? Where you had to previously account for 11, you had to sort of take 11.7 scholarships and figure that out across a roster of 34, 35 guys. That's not really super great when it comes to, hey, I have a kid who we really want, but another school's offering him three-quarters of a scholarship. I can only offer him a quarter of a scholarship, so be it. Now at the highest level, you're going to see schools that have 34 scholarships to play with, a full scholarship, go on your way. That's a real investment. So I think that when it comes to individual athletes, like I do think scholarships are a piece of this, especially in the Olympic sports. It's going to be a huge difference and a differentiator for a lot of places.
So right now, athletic directors, there's never probably been more attention on them because they are having to kind of be the face of some of these plans and the business of this going forward. And so I'm curious, from your dealings and your perspective, I think a lot of people down here can see what an athletic director is doing for their university. But from on a national level, what is your what reactions, what conversations have you seen about Trev Alberts and the job he does as an athletic director?
Yeah, I mean, look, Trev's involved in a lot nationally. He's done a lot, drawn in some big headlines and things like that. The Playfly deal is a big one, and drew some headlines for sure. And I think, obviously it was in settlement implementation as well. And I mean, that's a prominent place in helping to shape the structure of what this thing is going to look like moving forward. So, uh, look, Trev's a guy that's really well respected across the industry largely, and I think that has done a really good job in his past stops. And I think, is early in his tenure at A&M, but I think, things continue to move in the right direction.
So you mentioned Playfly, and that's the new multimedia rights deal that A&M inked, moving away from Learfield. They'll start with Playfly, and it was a big part of his presentation on Monday, talking about how Playfly is going to be integral in building up fair market NIL for the athletes, securing some of those deals. That kind of wing is called Playfly Max. You've done some stories on this. Just kind of pull back the curtain, if you wouldn't mind, on Playfly Max, and why this is such a big deal for A&M.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, the price tag, right? Like they're going to get about $35 million a year, I think is what the reported number has been in this contract and what they're going to see. That's a huge number for a guarantee from a multimedia partner. Like most of those are more like 5 and 15 on the high end, give or take. Um, that said, I think that, like Playfly's a little bit of a newer company. They've been around for about 3, 4, 5 years, give or take, at least in the college multimedia rights space. It's a broader company that does a lot of work in professional sports. And essentially what they're doing here is like, for the people who aren't super familiar, is like they're essentially selling sponsorships. So for the radio, for the in-stadium venues, things like that. They're going down to the car dealership and saying, hey, do you want to stick a billboard on the Jumbotron field or whatever it might be? Or they're on sponsorships, things like that. So I think they're really important in this day and age where, again, need revenue to pay these athletes, and so those multimedia rights partners are as important as ever before, right? Like they're super what schools are doing and where they can drive more revenue.
Sure. And you did a little reporting, and it was kind of big news that came out a couple weeks ago. This isn't necessarily quite A&M related, but it certainly is the state of Texas related. And that is this new private equity. I don't even know how to describe it well. Private equity arm, Elevate, that's from Velocity Capital Managed, but the main investor is the Texas Permanent Schools Fund, which ties into education here in the state of Texas. Can you break this down for me in a little bit? Because I think while maybe it won't, I don't know if A&M or Texas or any of the big schools in Texas are going to be looking too readily soon into private equity, but it does affect maybe some of the people, some of the retirements and stuff of the people who work for A&M.
Yeah, no, it's a good question. I mean, a lot of the money is coming from Texas pension fund, I believe. If I'm not, I might have put a little the word myself. But essentially, basically, where this money is coming from is a fund that is made up of investors from a lot of different places, but in Texas in particular. And so, essentially, what this is sort of a faster way to get a loan. Is kind of the way that it's been pitched a little bit. So, for example, like we said before, right? Schools need money quicker than they've ever needed it before. So this isn't necessarily you going to a private equity firm and saying, "Hey, $5 million to bankroll my roster." Like that's not what it is saying, okay, if I'm Texas A&M, I'll make up a hypothetical here. If I'm Texas A&M and I say, hey, I want to build It's new club level. And I know that that's going to generate me $10 million a year going forward. But obviously, in order to generate that revenue, I need to actually build the thing, right? But I need $5 or $10 million to build it front end, right? Essentially, you're going to go to Elevate and this private equity firm, and through this sort of fund that's funded through a private equity firm, and they're going to give you the cash up front of the $5 or $10 million or whatever you need to finish the project, and they're going to take a percentage on the back end of the revenues that you would generate from this project. So it essentially becomes a short-term loan or a quicker way to get a loan versus like doing it through the state procurement process and things like that. And that varies a ton state by state, sort of at what, levels you can borrow at and things like that. Again, like I get it, this is really in the weeds and complicated, but essentially it's a way to get cash quicker. What's those old cash commercials? Like what 588 cash now? I'm butchering that a
JG
little bit, right?
Wentworth or something. It's the college sports JG Wentworth.
Cash now, is that right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's a little bit of that where you're able to get cash a little bit quicker and start on these facility projects that are super important and can generate more significant revenue for you. Now, again, as far as I know, like there aren't any schools in the state of Texas that are in the middle of that right now, but I do think that will be an option for a lot of schools that are looking to do some sort of smaller scale development projects that can drive more revenue.
Yeah, Trev Alberts has said that going into debt to build buildings to finance anything is really out of the picture for A&M, at least moving forward in this new realm. So if you did need to take on a little bit of debt, it's a little bit of an easier way to maybe go about that. Okay, we've done a whole podcast now, and I know, of course, you're with the Sports Business Journal, so this is what you study. But when we talk about when I get to talk about these things on our podcast, the other two are still falling asleep the entire time while I'm talking about this. We kind of call it eating your broccoli before you get your dessert. So we'll give everybody a little palate cleanser here of what are some of the college football headlines that you're looking forward to the most heading into this fall?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm really interested to see what the Big 12 looks like, right? Like Texas Tech is spending crazy to fund their roster. I think it's a little bit of a point where Joey McGuire needs to show a little bit more and show some wins with what the investment has been. I think he's done a really good job, but I think that becomes a really interesting dynamic. I think what does Texas look like with Arch Manning at the helm? Like what does Texas A&M look like with Mike Elko in year two? And then if you spin it out sort of toward the ACC or things like that, Miami look like with Carson Beck? Can Clemson really rebound back? I think there's some really good stuff to watch this year. Frankly, living in Columbia, South Carolina, like what is South Carolina going to look like with Lenore Sellers in year two? I think the SEC becomes a really interesting league, and frankly, I think it's more up for grabs this year than it's been in a long time. I mean, this is the most wide open that I can remember the SEC and covering the league in 6-7 years. So I think it'll be really interesting to watch.
And I mean, probably most important to South Carolina fans, the Cockaboose is in the college football 26 video game. So, I mean, does it get any better than that in Columbia right now?
It's pretty good stuff. I don't know if we found out like which all the coaches that we found out are in the game, but like I know Shane Beamer's in it. I know Lane Kiffin's in it. I don't know if Mike Elko is going to be in it, but I'm excited for some of the discourse around what do some of the coaches' avatars look like when in a couple weeks when that launches.
Yeah, all three A&M coaches, the head coach and the two coordinators are going to be in the game, supposedly from what the school's put out. Mike Elko might actually be one of the most interesting artificially generated characters that I would have really liked to see Jimbo Fisher. He would have been an interesting one to see how they have the entire Cheesecake Factory menu in front of him of plays. Like there's some coaches that are they going to get really into the detail? I don't know. Who is there a coach that you're the most interested in seeing a artificial rendering of?
I mean, God bless his soul, but like Mike Leach with the like note card play sheet, like that would have been awesome, right?
Yeah.
Like, if we're going from Jimbo Fisher with the Waffle House menu to like, Mike Leach with the little note card in front of him, like that would have been a wide range. I think there's going to be some good ones. I know the Lane Kiffin one came out and there's been some, hashtag discourse around that one, but it's interesting. I think it'll be fun.
So I wonder, like, if you do like the mascot game or something, can you get Joey Freshwater? That's really what I would want. Like if the season goes bad, you can fire it and bring in Joey Freshwater. Maybe, I don't know. This is.
I think that's a way to do it. Yeah, no, I like where your head's at.
There you go. All right, man. Well, we won't keep you too long. Real quick before we get out of here, let the people know where they can find your work and where they can yell at you on social media.
Yeah, anywhere on sportsbusinessjournal.com and can catch me on the socials at bportnoy15. I'm easy to find. Yeah, anywhere and everywhere, I suppose.
Awesome, man. Well, thanks for giving us a little bit of your time to kind of help break down some of the national picture on some of this stuff. We'll be back here next week with more Aggie Game Day Extra podcast. It's the summertime. I'm not going to tell you what we're doing. We'll think of that when next week comes. So for the absent Tyler Shaw and Max Crawford, and for Ben Portnoy, I'm Travis Brown. This is the Aggie Game Day Extra podcast. We'll see you next week.